Survivors are not born in moments of victory. They are born in silence, in pain, in the seconds where giving up feels easier than breathing. No one noticed when it began. There was no dramatic collapse, no scream for help, just a quiet fracture inside something breaking without sound. The world kept moving, people kept talking, life kept demanding. And still, something inside learned how to endure. Fear came first, then loss, then the slow realization that no one was coming to save me. That was the moment everything changed, not because I became strong but because I stayed. Every night felt longer than the last. Every morning arrived with weight instead of hope. I carried wounds no one could see, learned how to smile with a storm in my chest, learned how to function while falling apart. And yet, I was still here. Each breath became an act of defiance. Each step forward, a quiet rebellion against everything that tried to erase me. I didn't win. I didn't heal. I didn't conquer the darkness, but I survived it. And in that survival raw, uncelebrated, unfinished something new was born. Not a hero, not a legend, a survivor. Survival didn't announce itself. It waited. It waited for the moment when the pain stopped being shocking and started being familiar. When waking up exhausted felt normal. When hope became something I remembered instead of something I felt. That was the crossroads. I could disappear quietly, fade into routines, into silence, into the version of myself that merely existed. Or I could choose something harder, staying. No one called it bravery. There was no applause. Just a decision made in the dark. I will not end here. The days that followed weren't victories. They were negotiations. With fear, with doubt, with the voice that whispered it would never get better. Every morning became a question. Every night, a test. Some days I failed. Some days I almost gave in. But I learned something vital. Survival isn't loud. It doesn't roar. It whispers, one more step, one more breath. I began to protect myself in small ways. Saying no, stepping back, letting myself feel instead of pretending I didn't. Each boundary was shaky, imperfect but real. And slowly, almost without noticing, I stopped waiting to be rescued. The choice had been made. I was still afraid, still wounded, still unsure, but I was choosing to live. And that was the moment survival became intention, not an accident. The first time I fought back, no one noticed. There was no confrontation, no raised voice, no dramatic exit. It happened quietly inside me. I didn't explain myself. I didn't apologize for needing space. I didn't bend just to keep the peace. And that scared me more than the pain ever had. Because standing up meant risking rejection. It meant choosing myself without knowing who would stay. It meant accepting that some people only loved the version of me that stayed silent. I felt the old fear rise: don't cause trouble. Don't ask for more. Don't be difficult. But something else rose with it. Something steadier. Self-respect. It wasn't confidence. I still doubted myself. Still replayed conversations in my head. Still wondered if I was wrong. But I didn't step back. That day, I learned a dangerous truth. The moment you stop betraying yourself, the world feels different. Some doors closed. Some relationships shifted. And yes, some people walked away. It hurt, but for the first time, the pain felt clean, honest. Not the slow poison of silence, but the sharp sting of choosing truth. I realized then, survival isn't just about enduring harm. It's about refusing to normalize it. I was still fragile, still healing, but I was standing. And a survivor who learns to stand is no longer just surviving. The moment I stopped bending, the world noticed. Not everyone, but the ones who benefited from my silence did. The ones who were comfortable with me being smaller, quieter, easier to carry. They felt the shift before they could name it. You've changed, they said, and they were right, but they didn't mean it as praise. The pushback came in subtle ways. Guilt wrapped in concern. Anger disguised as disappointment. Questions that weren't really questions, just attempts to pull me back into place. I doubted myself again. Was I being selfish? Too sensitive? Too much? That's how survival is tested, not by pain, but by pressure. It would have been easier to apologize, to smooth things over, to return to the version of me that caused no friction. That version was familiar, predictable, safe, but unsafe in a quieter way. So I stayed still. I let the discomfort exist without rushing to fix it. I let people feel what they felt without carrying it for them. That was new. That was terrifying. And in that space, I learned something crucial. Not everyone who resists your growth is your enemy. But not everyone deserves access to you either. Some relationships cracked. Some illusions shattered. And though it hurt, I could feel something solid forming underneath the pain. Boundaries. I wasn't loud. I wasn't cruel. I was just no longer available for harm. And that is when survival began to look like strength. When the noise faded, the silence felt loud. Boundaries did their job, but they also created distance. Conversations grew shorter. Invitations stopped coming. Familiar faces became memories instead of constants. Loneliness arrived without warning. At first, it felt like failure, like proof that I had made the wrong choice. The old voice returned, whispering that being alone was the price of being difficult. But then something unexpected happened. I could breathe. No more rehearsing what to say. No more shrinking to fit the room. No more carrying emotions that were never mine to hold. The quiet was heavy, but it was honest. In that space, I began to hear myself again. My thoughts, my needs, my limits. I realized how long I had been living in reaction mode. Adjusting, adapting, surviving for everyone but me. Loneliness still hurt, but it no longer consumed me. Because peace had moved in quietly, it didn't arrive as happiness. It arrived as relief, as rest, as the absence of constant tension. For the first time, my nervous system wasn't on guard. I learned that being alone isn't the same as being abandoned. Sometimes, it's just the space required to heal. And in that quiet, I wasn't breaking. I was rebuilding. At some point, the pain stopped being the center of everything. It didn't disappear. It didn't resolve itself neatly. It just stopped bleeding. I noticed it one day when I went hours without replaying the past. When my body felt lighter, not healed, but no longer bracing for impact. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. For so long, my identity had been shaped by what I endured. The things I escaped, the things I tolerated. But now, something new was forming quietly, without permission. Choice. I chose rest without guilt. I chose honesty without over-explaining. I chose myself without needing approval. It felt unfamiliar, sometimes uncomfortable. Growth usually is. There were moments I almost went back, not because it was better, but because it was known. Healing has a strange way of making the past look safer than it was. But I didn't go back. I stayed with the uncertainty. I let myself exist without a label, without a role, without the constant need to prove resilience. And slowly, I realized something powerful. I am not what broke me. I am what stayed. Survival was the foundation. Becoming was the future. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of who I was turning into. Hello, dear friends. Today, let's make a chocolate cake. First, prepare flour, cocoa powder, baking powder, salt, eggs, butter, and other ingredients. Mix them together and knead them into a fine dough. Next, let the dough rise until it becomes fluffy and soft. Then, scoop the cake batter into a baking pan and add the pre-made stuff. Finally, when the sweet cake comes out of the oven, exuding its tempting aroma, everyone gathers around to enjoy it together. The joy in their hearts is hard to explain. The biggest shift didn't come with confidence. It came with calm. One day, I noticed I wasn't second-guessing every decision. I still asked questions, still hesitated, but the panic was gone, the feeling that one wrong move would undo everything. I began to trust the pause. Trust that if something felt wrong, I would notice. Trust that if I made a mistake, I would survive it. Trust that I didn't need permission to protect my peace. That trust was earned, not assumed. It came from every moment I stayed instead of disappearing. From every boundary I held. From every setback I navigated without betraying myself. I stopped needing constant reassurance. Not because I had all the answers, but because I trusted myself to find them. The past still existed. The memories still visited. But they no longer controlled the room. I had learned how to sit with discomfort without letting it define me. For the first time, my inner voice felt like an ally instead of an enemy. And that changed everything. Because when you trust yourself, fear loses its grip. It may still speak, but it no longer decides. I wasn't fearless. I was grounded. And that was enough. Trusting myself changed how I saw others. Before, connection felt like risk. Like something I had to earn, manage, or survive. I let people in too fast or kept them out completely, nothing in between. This time was different. I didn't rush. I didn't overshare to feel safe. I didn't disappear to avoid being seen. I watched. I listened. I let people reveal who they were without trying to fix them or mold myself around them. And slowly, connection returned. Not intense, not consuming, just real. I learned that letting someone in doesn't mean handing them access to my wounds. It means allowing presence without surrendering boundaries. It means choosing honesty without self-erasure. Some people stayed, some drifted away, and I let that happen. Because connection, I realized, isn't about being needed. It's about being respected. For the first time, I felt companionship without anxiety, laughter without tension, silence without fear. I didn't feel like I had to perform or prove my worth. I was allowed to be human. And in that space, I understood something deeply grounding. I don't need to disappear to be loved. I don't need to be perfect to belong. I just need to be present. Love had always felt like a risk. a sharp edge disguised as warmth, a promise that could break at any moment. I had given it too freely. I had withheld it too carefully. Either way, it left scars. This time, I approached differently. I started small. I noticed moments of beauty in life without expecting them to last. I allowed myself to care for someone, or even just myself without immediately planning the escape route. I listened. I offered kindness. I accepted it when it came back. And slowly, the fear loosened. Love didn't have to be danger. It didn't have to erase my boundaries or my voice. It could exist alongside my scars, my trauma, my history. I realized something vital. Survival had taught me how to protect myself. Now, love was teaching me how to live. I didn't need to perform. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to anticipate the worst before it even happened. I just needed to be present, to give, to receive, to trust myself to navigate the complexity without losing my footing. For the first time, love felt safe not because it guaranteed happiness, but because I had learned that I could survive whatever came. And that was revolutionary. Survival teaches you many things: endurance, patience, boundaries, trust. But purpose, that's something else entirely. For years, I simply existed, moving from one challenge to the next, surviving without asking why. Then, slowly, I began to notice the spaces I had been ignoring, my own passions, my own potential, the things I could create instead of just withstand. Purpose didn't come as a revelation. It came as a whisper, a small nudge. What would you do if fear didn't matter? I started answering that question, in quiet ways at first, helping someone without expecting gratitude, saying something true when it was easier to stay silent, pursuing something I wanted simply because it mattered to me. Every act became a seed. Some grew, some withered, but I learned to keep planting, trusting the process rather than the outcome. And with that, I understood a new kind of strength, not just surviving life, not just protecting myself, but shaping it. I had become more than someone who endured. I had become someone who chose. Living fully doesn't come without resistance. The world didn't pause because I chose myself. People still questioned me, circumstances still pushed against me, and my own old habits still whispered, "Go back, stay small, it's safer." I faced obstacles I couldn't ignore, unexpected setbacks, disappointments, people who resented my boundaries, moments when fear tried to sneak back under the guise of reason. And I realized the real test wasn't survival anymore. It was choice. Every day became a series of small decisions. Do I engage or withdraw? Do I speak my truth or stay silent? Do I give love freely or retreat into suspicion? Each choice carried weight. Each choice demanded courage. And some days, I failed. I made the wrong decision. I hurt someone unintentionally. I doubted myself. But here's the difference. I no longer let failure define me. I faced it, learned from it, adjusted, continued. The survivor I had become wasn't invincible. They weren't perfect. They were deliberate, aware, intentional, and that made all the difference. Because surviving was the first act, living fully and wisely was the one that followed. I never set out to teach anyone. I never announced that I had figured it out. I simply lived differently. People noticed, slowly, subtly. A friend asked how I stayed calm in conflict. A colleague noticed I spoke up without fear of judgment. A stranger commented on the way. I listened, really listened without rushing to fix everything. And I realized, surviving didn't just change me. It changed the space around me. I wasn't giving advice. I wasn't offering solutions. I was showing something more powerful, that someone could endure, heal, and choose themselves without letting fear dictate their life. Some noticed, some didn't. Some were inspired, some were irritated. It didn't matter. I wasn't performing. I was living, and living fully became the quietest, strongest way to impact the world. Influence, I learned, isn't about words. It's about integrity, consistency, courage in the ordinary moments. A survivor doesn't just survive for themselves. They survive in ways that ripple outward, subtle, invisible, but undeniable. And in that quiet influence, I saw another kind of growth. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was shaping the world by showing it what living truly looked like. Joy didn't come like fireworks. It didn't announce itself with grand gestures. It arrived quietly, in ordinary moments, almost unnoticed. A morning where sunlight felt warm on my skin. A conversation that didn't leave me drained or afraid. A moment of laughter that stayed in my chest instead of fading immediately. I realized something profound. Surviving had led me here not just to existence, but to the ability to feel fully, without apology or fear. I could celebrate without guilt. I could succeed without dread. I could rest without worrying. The monsters my past fears, regrets, and traumas still existed. They had shaped me, but they no longer dictated the rhythm of my life. and in that realization, joy emerged. Pure, subtle, persistent. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't endless. It was human, and that made it real. For the first time, I saw that survival wasn't just a foundation, it was a launching point. I could build, create, love, and live, not in spite of the past, but alongside it. I smiled, quietly, deeply, knowing I had endured, I had learned, I had arrived, and the world, messy, unpredictable, beautiful, felt like home. The changes inside me started to ripple outward, not in headlines or announcements, not in grand gestures or speeches, but in small, persistent ways. A kind word to someone struggling, a refusal to participate in gossip or cruelty, a choice to model patience instead of reacting. People noticed, not always immediately, not always consciously. Some followed, some resisted, some ignored it altogether. It didn't matter. The ripple didn't need acknowledgement to exist. It moved because it had to. I saw it most clearly in moments I hadn't expected. A friend reaching out because they felt safer talking to me. A colleague taking a stand because they realized it was possible. A stranger smiling because someone finally listened. Survival had taught me resilience. Healing had taught me self-respect. Living fully had taught me presence. Now, I learned that the smallest acts rooted in integrity, grounded in awareness, could create impact far beyond what I could see. And I realized, this is legacy, not fame, not recognition, but quiet, persistent change. Ripples that travel farther than fear ever could. I had survived, and now, I was leaving something behind. I looked back at the path I had walked. Every scar, every sleepless night, every moment I had stayed when the world told me to leave. Every time I had said no to harm, yes to myself, and chosen the hard road instead of the easy escape. It all led here. The fear that once ruled me now existed as memory, not command. The doubts that once immobilized me now existed as tools, not chains. The monsters that haunted me had become markers, reminders of how far I had come. I realized something. Survival was never about avoiding pain. It was about learning how to carry it, about learning how to move through life without letting it destroy me. I was still flawed, still learning, still growing, but I was also whole, in a way I had never been before. The quiet joy, the ability to trust myself, the strength to set boundaries, the courage to connect and love, all of it was here now. And I understood this, finally. A survivor isn't defined by what they endure. A survivor is defined by what they become after enduring. I had survived. I had learned. I had lived. And in that moment, I smiled. Because a survivor is never just surviving. A survivor is becoming. The most profound changes rarely announce themselves. I began to notice small echoes of my growth in the world around me. A friend who had once struggled in silence now spoke openly. A colleague who had second-guessed themselves now acted with quiet confidence. A stranger who seemed lost found a spark in something I had done, or simply in the way I existed. I realized, survival doesn't just stay with the survivor. It spreads, quietly, invisibly, through example, presence, and consistency. Some ripples returned to me in unexpected ways. Messages of gratitude, a smile from someone I barely knew, an unexpected connection born from honesty and courage. And I understood. The monsters I had faced were never just obstacles. They were teachers, shaping me into someone who could influence without intending to, who could inspire without speaking. The echo was subtle. Not everyone noticed. Not everyone understood. But it didn't matter. The point was not recognition, it was continuation. Living fully, consciously, courageously, became its own message. And in that echo, I saw the ultimate lesson of survival. The strength to endure can transform into the power to uplift. I had survived. I had grown. And now, quietly, I was leaving a mark far beyond myself. Even now, life does not pause. The old fears sometimes whisper. Old doubts still linger. The scars, though faded, remain as quiet reminders. But survival has transformed. It is no longer about escaping pain. It is about choosing, every day, to live fully, honestly, and intentionally. I wake, I breathe, I move forward. I make decisions rooted in integrity, guided by experience, strengthened by lessons learned. The monsters of my past are no longer enemies. They are reminders, not to fear, but to honor, not to control, but to remember the strength I carry. And in the quiet of ordinary days, I feel it clearly. Survival is not a moment. It is a practice, a habit, a choice. I have survived. I have become. I continue to choose myself, and that is enough. Somewhere between fear and freedom, I pause. The world continues messy, loud, unpredictable. The monsters, once towering, now lie quietly in memory. The scars remain, soft reminders of what was endured, not chains to hold me back. I smile softly, Because survival is not about what you escape. It is about what you choose. Every breath, every step, every act of courage, big or small. I have survived. I have learned. I have become. And in that becoming, a quiet truth settles in my chest. A survivor is born not once, but again and again, with every challenge, every choice, every day lived fully. I am that survivor. I always have been. I always will be. This closes the story on a gentle, enduring note, reflective, empowering, and complete. Morning comes differently now. Not with fanfare, not with declaration. Just light spilling slowly, soft and steady, across the world I once feared. I rise. I breathe. I choose. The past is with me not to haunt, but to guide. The scars remind me of endurance. The lessons remind me of strength. The quiet victories remind me of who I've become. I walk forward, knowing this truth. A survivor is never finished. They are always becoming, always choosing, always growing, always present. And in the simple act of showing up, day after day, I realize the monsters no longer define me. The past no longer confines me. I am free. I am here. I am whole. I am alive. And so, a survivor is born again and again, in every breath, in every step, in every dawn. This is the final chapter, the full circle of survival, growth, and quiet empowerment.